Hello, viewers of the future, and welcome to more Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I'm running out of things to do to the book to show off the cover. Anyways, last time we were reading, they were attacked by see-through invisible Y-birds. I think that's how it says. Hold on, let me look at the title of it. They were calling them dragons, so I don't know why I went with the fancy name. Oh yeah, Weinberg is the... Wimberg, whatever, is the name of the place. So yeah, they were attacked by dragons. Everyone was caught except Kryn, the sword, talking sword, and Rincewind the wizard. I gotta see where I went to, where I read to. Okay. I didn't remember where it was. Alright. Boop. Try again, said the sword encouragingly. Rincewind groaned and grit his teeth. Could be worse, said Kring. Kring. It's K-R-I-N-G. Kring. This could have been an anvil. Yarg, hissed the wizard, fearing for the future of his groin. I have had a multi-dimensional existence, said the sword. I have had many names, you know. Amazing, said Rincewind. He swayed backwards as the blade slid free. It felt strangely light. Back on the ground again, he decided to break the news. I really don't think rescue is a good idea, he said. I think we'd better head back to the city. You know, to raise a search party. The dragons headed hubward, said Kring. However, I suggest we start with the one in the tree over there. Sorry, but you can't leave them to their fate. Rincewind looked surprised. I can't, he said. No, you can't. Look, I'll be frank. I've worked with better material than you, but it's either that or... Have you ever spent a million years in a coal measure? Look, So if you don't stop arguing, I'll Let's start the line again. So if you don't stop arguing, I'll chop your head off. Rincewind saw his own arm snap up until the shimmering blade was humming a mere inch from his throat. He tried to force his fingers to let go. They wouldn't. I don't know how to be a hero, he shouted. I propose to teach you. That voice isn't that hard, but I hope it's picking up well enough. I haven't actually listened to my own voice of Kring. Bronze Pasepha rumbled deep in his throat. Castle, the dragon rider, leaned forward and squinted across the clearing. I see him, he said. He swung himself down easily from branch to branch and landed lightly on the tussocky grass, drawing his sword. He took a long look at the approaching man, who was obviously not keen on leaving the shelter of the trees. He was armed, but the dragon rider observed with some interest... He was armed, but the dragon rider observed with some interest the strange way in which the man held the sword in front of him at arm's length, as though embarrassed to be seen in its company. Endragh hefted his own sword and grinned expansively? Yeah, it's a split word. It's written as EXPAN-SIVELY. Expensively at the wizard as the wizard shuffled towards him. Then he leapt. Later, he remembered only two things about the fight. He recalled the uncanny way in which the wizard's sword curved up and caught his own blade, with a shock that jerked it out of his grip. The other thing, and it was this, he averted, that led to his downfall, was that the wizard was covering his eyes with one hand. Endragh jumped back to avoid another thrust and fell full length on the turf. With a snarl, Pa unfolded his great wings and launched himself from his tree. A moment later, the wizard was standing over him, shouting... Sorry, my leg's itchy. Okay. Shouting, Tell it that if it singes me, I'll let the sword go. I will! I'll let it go! So tell it! The tip of the black sword was hovering over Endragh's throat. What was odd was the wizard was obviously struggling with it, and it appeared to be singing to itself. Pispa. P-S-E-P-H-A. Endragh shouted, which is K! S-D-R-A, shouted. The dragon roared in defiance, but pulled out of the dive that would have removed Rincewind's head, and flapped ponderously back to the tree. "Talk!" screamed Rincewind. Straw squinted at him up the length of the sword. "What would you like me to say?" he asked. "What?" White-knuckled grip to a conveniently... Whoop, I think I skipped a page. I did indeed. I said, "What would you like me to say? Where are my friends? Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean." Wait, what? "Talk!" shouted... What? I said, "What would you like me to say? Where are my friends?" Okay, I'm getting a little bit confused. Hold on. Let me start this conversation again. "Talk!" shouted Rincewind. Straw squinted at him up the length of the sword. "What would you like me to say?" he asked. "What?" I said, "What would you like me to say? Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean." I think that's supposed to be... So, this is really weird. Alright, I'm gonna have to actually take pictures of these, I think. Because, like, it says Rincewind starts to talk, then probably Straw talks back, and then what from Rincewind? I said, "What would you like me to say?" Should probably be... I'm gonna show it to you. I don't know if it's gonna work again. It usually doesn't. So, like, that's the full paragraph. What would you like me to say? Where are my friends? Like, there's the first line. And then the line that's probably, "Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean," is probably Rincewind, but it's not like that in this book. So I'm going to expect that to be it. So, I said, "What would you like me to say?" Break. "Where are my friends? Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean." I expect they have been taken back to the Wormburg. Rincewind tugged desperately against the surge of the sword, trying to shut his mouth to Kring's bloodthirsty humming. "What's a Wormburg?" he said. "The Wormburg. There is only one. It is the Dragon Home. It is Dragon Home. And I suppose you're waiting to take me there, eh?" Straw yelped involuntarily as the tip of the sword pricked a bead of blood from his Adam's apple. Don't want people to know you've got dragons here, huh?" snarled Rincewind. The dragon rider forgot himself enough to nod, and came within a quarter inch of cutting his own throat. Rincewind looked around desperately, and realized that this was something he was really going to have to go through with. "Right then," he said as defiantly as he could manage. "You better take me to this Wormburg of yours, haven't you? I was supposed to take you in dead," he muttered Straw sullenly. Rincewind looked down at him and grinned slowly. It was a wide, manic, and utterly humorless rictus. It was the sort of grin that is normally accompanied by small riverside birds wandering in and out, picking scraps out of the teeth. "Alive will do," said Rincewind. "If we were talking about anyone being dead, remember whose sword is in which hand. If you kill me, nothing will prevent killing you," he shouted the prone dragon rider. So what I'll do is, I'll chop bits off," agreed the wizard. He tried the effect of the grin again. "Oh, all right," Straw sulkily said. Straw sulkily. "Do you think I've got no imagination?" He wiggled out from under the sword and waved at the dragon, which took wing again and glided in towards them. Rincewind swallowed. "You mean we've got to go on that?" he said. Straw looked at him scornfully, the point of Kring still aimed at his neck. "How else would anyone get to the Wormburg?" "I don't know," said Rincewind. "How else?" "I mean, there is no other way. It's flying or nothing." Rincewind looked again at the dragon before him. He could quite clearly see through it to the crushed grass on which it laid, but when he gingerly touched the scales, there was a mere golden sheen on thin air. When he gingerly touched a scale that was a mere golden sheen on thin air, it was felt solid enough. Either dragons should exist completely, or fail to exist at all, he felt. A dragon only half existing was worse than the than the extremes. I don't. I didn't know. I didn't know dragons could seen through. He said. Straw shrugged. Didn't you know? Didn't you? He said. He swung himself astride the dragon awkwardly, because Rincewind was hanging on to his belt. Once uncomfortably aboard, the wizard moved his white-knuckled grip to a convenient piece of harness and prodded Straw lightly with the sword. Have you ever flown before? Said the dragon rider without looking around. Not as such, no. Would you like something to suck? Rincewind gazed at the back of the man's head, then dropped to the bag of red and yellow sweets that were being pre-offered. Is it necessary? He asked. It is a traditional, said Straw. Please yourself. The dragon stood up, lumbering heavily across the meadow and fluttering into the air. Rincewind occasionally had nightmares about teetering on some intertangible but enormously high place, and seeing a blue distant, cloud-punctured landscape reeling away below him. This usually woke him up with his ankles sweating. He would have been even more worried had he known that the nightmare was not, as he thought, just the usual Discworld vertigo. It was a backwards memory of an event in his future so terrifying that it had generated harmonics of fear all the way along his lifeline. This was not the event, but it was very good practice for it. Pspa clawed its way into the air with a series of vertebrae-shattering bounds. At the top of its last leap, the wide wings unfolded with a snap and spread out with a thump which shook the trees. Then the ground was gone, dropping away in a series of gentle jerks. Pspa was suddenly rising gracefully, the afternoon sunlight gleaming off wings that were still no more than golden film. Rincewind made the mistake of glancing downwards, and found himself looking through the dragon to the treetops below, far below. His stomach shrank at the sight. Closing his eyes wasn't much better, because it gave his imagination full rein. He compromised by gazing fixedly into the middle distance, where moonlands and forests drifted by and could be contemplated almost casually. Wind snatched at him. Straw half turned and shouted into his ear, "Behold, the Wormberg!" Rincewind turned his head slowly, taking care to keep Cringe resting lightly on the dragon's back. His streaming eyes saw the impossibly inverted mountain rearing out of the deep forested valley like a trumpet in a tube of moss. Even at this distance, he could make out the faint octagon glow in the air that must be indicating a stable magical aura of at least, he gasped, several million primes? At least. Oh no, he said. Even looking at the ground was better than that. He averted his eyes quickly, and realized that he could now no longer see the ground through the dragon. As they glided around in a wide circle towards the Wormberg, it was definitely taking on a more solid form. As if the creature's body was filled with a golden mist. By the time the Wormberg was in front of them, swinging wildly across the sky, the dragon was as real as a rock. Rincewind thought he could see a faint streak in the air, as if something from the mountain had reached out and touched the beast. He got the strange feeling that the dragon was being made more genuine. Ahead of it, the Wormberg turned from a distant toy to several billion tons of rocks posed between heaven and earth. He could see small fields, woods, and lakes up there, and from the lakes a river spilled out and over the edge. He made the mistake of following the thread of foaming water with his eyes, and jerked himself back just in time. The flared plateau of the upturned mountain drifted towards them. The dragon didn't even slow. As the mountain loomed over Rincewind like the biggest fly swatter in the universe, he saw a cave mouth. Pspa skimmed towards it, shoulder muscles pumping. The wizard screamed as the dark spread and enfolded him. There was a brief vision of rock flashing past, blurring blurred by speed. Then the dragon was in the open again. It was inside a cave, but bigger than any cave had a right to be. The dragon glided across its vast emptiness, was a mere glided fly in a banquet. Sorry, the dragon gliding across its vast emptiness was a mere glided fly in a banquet hall. There were other dragons, gold, silver, black, white, flapping across the sun-shafted air on errands of their own, or perched on outcrops of rock, high in the domed roof of the cavern. Scores of others hung from huge rings, their wings wrapped bat-like around their bodies. There were men up there, too. Rincewind swallowed hard when he saw them, because they were walking on that broad expansion of ceiling like flies. Yeah. Then he made out the thousands of tiny rings that studded the ceiling. A number of invented men were watching Pisfa's flight with interest. Rincewind swallowed again. For the life of him, he couldn't think of what to do next. "Well," he asked in a whisper, "any suggestions?" "Obviously you attack," said Cringe scornfully. "Why didn't I think of that?" said Rincewind. Could it be because they all have crossbows?" "You're a defeat..." Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. "Why didn't I think of that?" said Rincewind. "Could it be because they all have crossbows?" "You're a defeatist." "Defeatist? That's because I'm going to be defeated." "You're your own worst enemy, Rincewind," said the sword. Rincewind looked up at the grinning man. "Bet?" he said warily. Before Cringe could reply, Pispat reared in midair and alighted on one of the large rings, which rocked alarmingly. Would you like to die now, or surrender first?" said Strass calmly. Men were converging on the ring from all directions, walking with a swaying motion as their hooked boots engaged the ceiling rings. There were more boots on the rack that hung in a small platform built on the side of the perch ring. Before Rincewind could stop him, the dragon rider had leapt from the creature's back to land on the platform, where he stood grinning at the wizard's discomfort. There was a small, expansive sound made by a number of crossbows being cocked. There was a small, expressive sound made by a number of crossbows being cocked. Rincewind looked up at a number of impassive, upside-down faces. The dragon's folk's taste in clothing didn't run into anything much more imaginative than a leather harness studded with bronze ornaments. Knives and sword sheaths were worn inverted. Those who were not wearing helmets let their hair flow freely, so that it moved like seaweed in the ventilation breeze near the roof. There were several women among them. The inversion did strange things to their anatomy. Rincewind stared. "Surrender!" said Kistra again. Rincewind opened his mouth to do so. Cringe hummed a warning, and agonizing waves of pain shot up his arm. "Never!" he squeaked. The pain stopped. "Of course he won't," boomed an expansive voice behind him. "He's a hero, isn't he?" Rincewind turned and looked into a pair of hairy nostrils. They belonged to a heavily built young man, hanging nonchalantly from the ceiling by his boots. "What is your name, hero?" said the man, "so that we know who you are." Agony shot up Rincewind's arm. I'm Rincewind of Enkum," he managed to gasp, "and I am Dragon Lord, and that's LIO exclamation point RT," said the hanging man, pronouncing the word with a harsh, that's probably supposed to be loin, I don't know. Pronouncing the word with a harsh click in the back of his throat that Rincewind could only think of as a kind of integral pronunciation. "You have come to challenge me in mortal combat." "Well, no, I didn't. You are mistaken." Okay. "You are mistaken. Kistra, help our hero into a pair of hook boots. I am sure he is anxious to get started. No, look, I just came here to find my friends. I'm sure there's no... Rincewind began as the dragon rider guided him firmly onto the platform, pushed him onto a seat, and proceeded to strap the hook boots to his feet. Hurry, Kistra. We mustn't keep our hero from his destiny, said Loin... I don't know how to say these names. Look, I expect my friends are happy enough here, so if you could just, set me down somewhere. You will see your friends soon enough, said the Dragon Lord airily. If you are religious, I mean. None who enter the Wormburg ever leave again, except metaphorically, of course. Show him how to reach the rings, Kstra. Look what you've got me into, hissed Rincewind. Cringe vibrated in his hand. Remember that I am a magic sword, it hummed. How can I forget? Climb the ladder and grab a ring, said the dragon rider. Then bring your feet up until the hooks catch. He helped the protesting wizard climb until he was hanging upside down, robes tucked into his breeches, cringe dangling from one hand. And that's what we're gonna read next time. Oh no, I've lost my bookmark. I'll have to find it after. That's what we're gonna read next time. The fight between Rincewind and the Dragon Lord. Loin... I don't know how to explain. I don't know what exclamation point means in a name. It could mean anything. So yeah, that has been Color of Magic. Next time we're gonna have a upside down hook ring fight, I guess. So I've been Endragh. This has been the Color of Magic. I hope I brought a smile to your face, and I will see you tomorrow night. Night, night, guys.